Michigan.
Mr. President, before we broke for the August recess, I came to the Senate floor to sound the alarm on our rising national debt and unsustainable fiscal trajectory. Today, I'm here to continue this discussion and remind this body of the dangers we face if we do not change course. In fact, just last week, the Congressional Budget Office announced that our federal deficit this year alone has already surpassed $2 trillion.
Folks, listen up. Here we go again. Another Democrat senator standing on the Senate floor, pounding the podium, acting like they just discovered the national debt problem yesterday. He's blaming Republicans, pointing fingers at Bush, Trump, and every tax cut under the sun, while conveniently ignoring the fact that Democrats are the kings and queens of reckless spending. Think about it. This year alone, our deficit has already blown past $2 trillion. That's not just some number on a screen. That's your money, my money, our kids' future. And while he's trying to scare us with those numbers, notice what he doesn't say. That under Biden and the Democrat majority, we've had the most out-of-control spending spree in modern history. Green New Deal wish lists, student loan giveaways, endless foreign aid, you name it, they're writing the checks and you're footing the bill.
If that holds, it'll be the third largest deficit accrued in a single fiscal year in U.S. history, behind only the first 2 years of the COVID pandemic. To further put it into perspective, this debt has grown by $700 billion in just the 6 weeks since I spoke about this issue on the floor. That trajectory is incredibly alarming. So, in this case, time is money, and time is running out. And as we approach our next government funding deadline, it's important that we look back on how we got to this point and what we can do about it. Let's look back. On September 30th, 1996, Congress did something that no Congress had done in 30 years. It passed all 12 appropriations bills before the start of the next fiscal year. 1 year later, Congress built on that success by working with then President Clinton to enact the Balanced Budget Act and set enforceable budget caps. And what occurred after this series of bipartisan, common sense cooperation? A 4-year period of budget surpluses. During that time, our economy grew, unemployment and inflation rates reached their lowest levels since the 1960s. Unfortunately, that was the first time since 1969 that our country had experienced a budget surplus, and unfortunately, we have not achieved it since. But the moral of this story is that progress is possible when we set politics aside, work in a bipartisan way, and enact common sense solutions that benefit all of us. Unfortunately, we did not stay on that bipartisan, fiscally responsible path for very long. So let's take a look at what happened next. In 2001, Congress and President George W. Bush enacted a series of tax bills. And I certainly believe that a good tax bill is one that provides relief to middle-class families, and which are the backbone of our economy, and ensures that everyone pays their fair share. But the tax cuts passed during the Bush era did just the opposite, largely benefiting the highest income earners in our country, and in the process, increased the federal debt by trillions of dollars. In fact, in just 3 years, these tax laws caused our country to double the amount of debt that it had accumulated since our nation was founded, putting us on a worse financial footing when we later faced 2 major wars and a global financial crisis. After the 2008 financial crisis, many, including myself, knew that we had to take action to restore fiscal stability. And in the following years, Congress pursued well-intentioned efforts to put us on a better financial path, from attempts to limit deficit spending to identifying fraud, waste, and abuse. But unfortunately, once again, politics got in the way. Republicans threatened to default on our debt rather than come to the table. And this reckless approach led to a permanent extension of the Bush tax cuts and the first of what would be three downgrades to our country's federal credit rating. Fast forward to 2017, when instead of working with Democrats to enact responsible tax reform, Republicans followed the same old tired script. They pushed through a partisan law that benefited the wealthiest Americans and, you guessed it, added $2 trillion to the national debt. Added $3.5 trillion to the federal deficit. For those doing the math at home, after our 4-year run of surpluses in 2001, the national debt stood at $5.8 trillion. Today, we stand at more than $37 trillion. All because my Republican colleagues are seemingly convinced that giving tax cuts to the ultra-wealthy will somehow magically help the nation. But time and time again, we've seen the same script yield the same results. This approach simply does not work. Since 2001, $31.6 trillion has been added to our total debt, and thanks to the big bad bill, that total is about to get supercharged. But Mr. President, it won't stop there. Later this month, this body will once again be faced with an impending fiscal challenge funding the federal government. And doing so used to be the bare minimum requirement of Congress. The expectation of most Americans is we just pass the bare minimum and do that and fund the government. It's now become an annual struggle. I stand ready to work with my Republicans to pass a true bipartisan government funding bill, one that ensures vital programs remain funded and that our government remains open. Failure to do so will mean economic catastrophe and a continuation of the trends of the past 30 years that we have just walked through. We can't let that happen, and we must work to end these harmful patterns before it is too late. Working together on the upcoming fiscal package can be that start. If the past 3 decades have shown us anything, it's that there is precedent for how to put our country on a more sustainable financial path. We did it in the late 90s, and we even did it in the early 2010s when we came to several bipartisan compromises. But if we're going to solve this, it's going to take real political courage. The roadmap is certainly there. Now it's just up to each and every one of us to follow that map. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Here's the truth, patriots. Cutting taxes for working families isn't the problem. Washington's addiction to spending is. Every time the government taxes you less, you have more freedom to invest in your family, your business, and your community. But when Washington spends like crazy, they rack up the debt, devalue the dollar, and leave you holding the bag. So no, I don't buy this Republicans are the problem script. We need serious spending cuts, not more finger-pointing. If we had real fiscal discipline, like a balanced budget amendment, term limits, and accountability for every wasted dollar, America would be back on track. And patriots, this is where you come in. Don't just sit on the sidelines. Share this video, hit that subscribe button, and drop a comment below. Tell me where you think Washington wastes the most of your hard-earned money. Together, we can keep fighting for accountability, common sense, and the America our founders envisioned.